Good morning from a cloudy but dry Ypres. So yes, I'm able to go out and have a bit of a half tour of the salient this morning, and then later this afternoon I'll be leaving Belgium and I'll be cycling to Bourges in France, which lines me up for a short ride to the ferry at Dunkirk tomorrow afternoon. Just had an uninvited guest. I'm cycling along and I've just gone to felt something on my head, you know. What is that? I stopped and a great big slug underneath my helmet on top of my head. Oh God. Do you know what, since I've left the campsite, I haven't been on the main road. Been riding for 3.5 miles and the whole thing has been on cycle path. This is just how fantastic Belgium is for cyclists.
I'm just north of the village of Saint-Julien and close to the front line that in April of 1915 was held by the French Algerian Division, and alongside to the east men of the Canadian 1st. And it was here that poison gas would be first used in a full-scale attack in the war. Developed by a German chemist, it was hoped that the deadly new invention would help break the deadlock on the next big German offensive. So at 5 p.m. on the 22nd of April 1915, German troops released gas from metal canisters all along their front line. A slight breeze carried the deadly yellow-green cloud into the Allied trenches, and without any protection, thousands of troops were overcome and fell choking to the ground. Many of the Algerians, gasping for breath, panicked and ran away, opening up a perilous 4-mile gap in the line. The Canadians on the right flank withstood the attack and held their position. But the Germans, stunned by the success of the gas, hesitated with caution and were slow to advance. This allowed French, Canadian and British units to quickly plug the 4-mile gap by early morning. The Germans were to release more gas in another attack on the 24th, by which time some of the troops were now using improvised masks made of cotton pads soaked in bicarbonate of soda or even urine. They managed with great determination to once again hold the line. So the use of gas had proved devastating in this first attack, and protection for the troops was desperately needed. In the months that followed, basic smoke hoods with gas goggles and helmets with respirators were made. Eventually, the effective smallbox respirator became the standard issue mask for British soldiers by August of 1916. Whilst not perfect, it would certainly help to save lives.
So there you go. Gas attacks, nasty business. And this was where the first one was carried out in April 1915, as a result of which 2,000 Canadians were killed. So thus started chemical warfare. I mean, yes, the British did use gas, and then the Germans developed different types of gas, and it went backwards and forwards. This particular attack, I believe, was chlorine gas, but there was other types of gas that was used. Phosgene gas, mustard gas. Absolutely awful. If it wasn't bad enough already, they had to use chemical warfare on each other.
Before leaving the campsite this morning, I thumbed through my well-used guidebook and noticed a story that interested me of a lesser-known memorial lying close to the Canadian monument. It was erected by a local Belgian farmer who in 2003 found a sheep pinned to a fence post on his farm. It was written by a woman telling the story of her grandfather, Stephen Henshaw, a soldier who was badly wounded during Passchendaele and lay here in a shell hole for 6 days, but sadly died soon after being recovered. Then in 2004, the granddaughter who had placed the note visited with family and was overwhelmed to find this stone memorial in place. Stephen Henshaw's son and daughter, now both in their 90s, were moved by this kind gesture for their father. I was touched by this story, and it goes to show the gratitude still felt by the people of Belgium so many years after the war. After the success of taking the Messines Ridge, General Haig set in motion his big plan for a war-winning breakthrough at the end of July 1917. The ultimate objectives would be to capture the Roullet rail hub and the U-boat bases on the Belgian coast in a major offensive known as the Third Battle of Ypres. We are now in the area where the British held the front line in October of 1917, close to the village of Passchendaele. General Haig optimistically believed that the German army was severely weakened from recent British attacks and was keen to push further eastwards and capture the Passchendaele Ridge. But first, Passchendaele would need to be taken with a major assault set for the 9th of October. However, after months of artillery shellfire and torrential rain in early October, the already torn up battlefield had turned into a swamp. Conditions were dire, yet Haig insisted on the attack. So on the morning of the 9th of October, the British 2nd and 5th Armies moved forward. But in the mud the men slowed and soon became exhausted. Many failed to reach their start lines, and it was almost impossible for the horses to bring up artillery and supplies. Tanks fared no better, becoming hopelessly stuck. And in places the mud was so deep that soldiers and horses became trapped and drowned. In the few places where some ground was gained, most was quickly retaken by German counterattacks. The battle was seen as a defensive success for Germany. The British and Commonwealth had lost 12,000 men killed and wounded, of which 2,500 were lost to the mud and never recovered. Their names are now commemorated at the Tyncott and Miningate memorials to the missing. Acting on misleading reports, General Haig believed that some advances had been made on the 9th of October, and so he ordered a further full-scale attack to continue the push towards Passchendaele just 3 days later. I've come here to Passchendaele to retrace the steps of my great-uncle Jack and his battalion, the 8th East Surreys. They moved into the front line here when they would form part of an assault on the 12th of October. They held a line that was just a few yards beyond the road that we see here. Their boundary on the right was marked by a small stream called the Lekker Boterbeek, and to the far left the boundary was Gloucester Farm, around a quarter of a mile away. The British preliminary bombardment had been too light and had failed to destroy the enemy machine guns, who were able to pour fire upon the East Surreys before they had even moved forward. And at 5:25 the attack began. but the mud was so bad that moving quickly was impossible, and many men were cut down whilst rushing for cover between the shell holes.
Germans had slipped through from the far side of the Letterboter Beak to some piles of rubble, which I think were called Oxford houses and then beak houses. These are featured on the trench map, and it's from those little rubble outcrops, if you like, where snipers were taking out the East Surreys as they were moving across. On the right hand side, this brick built farm, I don't know what it's called now, but it's in the same shape as the farm that was depicted on the trench maps, and that was called Gloucester Farm. So this marked the northern edge of what was held by the 8th East Surreys. Now, interestingly, just 100 yards or so, according to the battalion diaries, the Surreys were unaware, but there was at least one German machine gun post. So as they advanced, they were chopped down.
Between 60 and 100 men now lay dead in front of the farm. Almost all the officers leading the attack had been killed or wounded, and the battalion messengers were unable to cross the open ground owing to the enemy machine guns. Leadership and communication had been all but lost, and the situation had become uncertain. But what was certain was that almost no progress had been made, and by the evening the East Surreys had fallen back to their original start lines to await relief. However, the German artillery poured more misery on the British during the night and scored a direct hit on the East Surreys Battalion HQ, killing 5 men, to cap a disastrous day of action. When they were finally relieved on the 14th, the East Surreys had lost 240 men and officers killed or wounded, and this would be a similar story up and down the British front line. The British had been beaten by 2 enemies, the German Fourth Army and the Flanders Mud. And it was the mud that made troop movement and communication almost impossible. Yet somehow there was at least one runner who managed to keep lines of communication open by delivering messages across the swamp-like battlefield that day. And that runner was Jack Bagg, who was awarded a 3rd bar to his military medal for volunteering several times to carry messages whilst under concentrated enemy shelling. However, a few weeks later the 3rd bar was subsequently cancelled, and instead the more prestigious Distinguished Conduct Medal was awarded to Lance Corporal John James Ernest Bagg, my great uncle Jack.
And that was pretty much how it was for all his medals. He volunteered to run messages no matter what. He was with the 8th East Surreys all the way through and was discharged on the 7th of November 1918. He was popular as an older man. Apparently he was a steam engine driver and never spoke of the war.
By the time Passchendaele had been captured by the Canadian Corps on the 10th of November, it had been virtually razed to the ground. Haig's master plan to capture the rail network and the German-held Belgian ports never materialised, and so his vision to end the war had failed.
Well, it was mud, mud everywhere, mud in the trenches, mud in front of the trenches, behind the trenches. Every shell hole was a sea of filthy, oozing mud. I was tired of seeing infantry sinking back in that morass, never to come out alive again.
Cool. It's a bit windy now. The drone was struggling back there in Pokapel. Anything more than about 20 or 30 metres up, and I was getting warnings to say that the drone will not be able to return to the home point. Bit of a heart in mouth moment that. I had to drop the drone down to about 5-6 foot off the ground and just sort of skim all the way back. It's nice to see the poppies, isn't it? Need a bit of chocolate, I think. Almost missed this. How could I come to Flanders and miss this?
This is Harry Patch, and Harry would become quite the character in old age, as of all the millions of men that fought in the First World War, Harry would end up being the last living survivor of the trenches. Harry was a Lewis gunner with the Duke of Cornwall Light Infantry. He fought here during the Battle of Passchendaele, and it was at this very spot where Harry and his comrades crossed the Steenbeck River during their advance to capture Langemarck village in August of 1917. At the ripe old age of 110, Harry returned to lay this memorial in honour of his pals that he fought alongside that day. But just a month later, Harry and his Lewis gun team were blown up by a German shell, which killed 3 men. But luckily Harry survived but was badly injured by shrapnel. He was to be returned to England and his fighting days would be over. For 80 years Harry did not speak of the war, but eventually he was encouraged to share his experiences and spoke publicly. He appeared on TV documentaries, and he became a strong advocate for peace. He even went on to publish a book of his life called The Last Fight in Tommy, making him the world's oldest author at the age of 109. And so in the end, of course, time did catch up with Harry, and on the 25th of July 2009, the old warrior slipped away peacefully aged 111, the last survivor of the trenches and also the oldest man in Europe. Harry now lies at rest close to the place where he once lived in Somerset near Bath. The site for this memorial was chosen because it lies close to where the Welsh regiments were in action at Pilkham Ridge on the opening day of the Battle of Passchendaele. It would include the return of the 38th Welsh Division, who had not fought since Mametz Wood the previous year, where they had suffered severe casualties. A nearby plaque commemorates 3 Welshmen who won the Victoria Cross for their bravery during the attack. The prolific Welsh poet Ellis Evans, known as Head Wyn, was also involved at Pilkham Ridge but was badly wounded and died the same day. Throughout my journey I've passed by countless memorials and cemeteries. The scale of death is immense and impossible to fully grasp. But the great majority of men did survive, though many would be wounded. So it'd be interesting to learn more at my next stop. A wounded soldier would first be seen to by their battalion medical officer in a regimental aid post for assessment and basic treatment. And for anything more extensive, he would be moved further behind the lines to an advanced dressing station such as this one known as Essex Farm. They were usually set up in ruined buildings, dugouts or bunkers, which gave some protection from shell fire and aerial attack. Dressing stations were well organised with dressing rooms, officers' quarters, a kitchen and a latrine. And it was staffed usually by around 10 medical officers who were supported by orderlies and stretcher bearers of the Royal Army Medical Corps. The stretcher bearers were brave volunteers who would venture into no man's land to recover the wounded, often under enemy fire. They worked in teams of 4 to 6 and became skilled in battlefield medicine, providing important first on-site essential care like hemorrhage control, much like the paramedics of today. Treatment and operations took place here in these cramped conditions, where wounds were plugged and broken bones reset. After a battle with high numbers of wounded, they were always overwhelmed and many men had to lie in the open to wait their turn for treatment. Patients that were more seriously wounded were evacuated by ambulance to casualty clearance stations or base hospitals where more extensive and specialist care would be available. But ultimately, for some soldiers with serious wounds, they were shipped back to Britain, or dear old Blighty as it was called, for treatment. The wound was known as a Blighty wound, so the wounded soldier would be said to be on his way home with a Blighty, meaning their time fighting on the front line was over. Thousands would have passed through this dressing station, but for those casualties that died, their journey was over, and they were buried just a few yards away in what became known as Essex Farm Cemetery. It was here in 1915 where a Canadian medical officer called John McCrae witnessed the death of a close friend. He was so moved that he wrote the poem In Flanders Fields, inspired from how he saw the poppies growing amongst the white crosses in the cemetery nearby. After being published in Punch magazine, the poem gained instant popularity and was used to bolster recruitment and the sales of victory bonds. McCrae was promoted to Lieutenant Colonel and assigned to a general hospital in Boulogne in France, where he continued treating the wounded until he contracted pneumonia and sadly died in January of 1918. John McCrae's legacy lives on in his poem In Flanders Fields, and in transforming the poppy as a symbol of remembrance for soldiers lost in conflict.
I wonder if all these years later John McCrae would ever really believe just what the poppy means now. How it's become sort of a symbol of remembrance. Wow. Okay, just following my way along the canal for a stretch, and then I'll be turning away from Ypres to say goodbye to what is a lovely town, there's no doubt in that. It's got a lot to offer. Those cobbles and that town as I just passed through there really rattled my back, you know. Although there's only 45 or 50 headstones, there's actually more people here than that. I noticed some of the plots have got more than one person in. Interestingly, this one, 3 victims, civilian victims of the 1418 Mauler. I didn't realise civilians were buried here also. It's the first I've seen. Here we go, Red Farm Cemetery. It's had at least one visitor today. Give us a tow, mate. Tell you what, this wind's been pretty good for drying the old socks, right? I washed them last night and they were damp. I mean, obviously they've been there a few hours now, they're bone dry. Wind has its advantages, I guess, sometimes. Just got passed by the old Tour de France, I think. Day today. I think it's going to be the work out to be the longest day's riding so far. Over 40 miles. Yeah, here now. Well, I'm here in the little town, or big town of Burges. And it's absolutely lovely. It's an old medieval town, I believe. It's got, like I say, ramparts, fortifications, a belfry, and it fits very much the Flemish style of these fortified towns that you see in the area. It's not unlike Ypres actually, but on a sort of a smaller scale.
Burges was heavily damaged by German guns during the war, but it was during the Second World War when the British who held Burges faced the advancing German invasion in May of 1940. With Dunkirk just 6 miles to the north, they held the line here just long enough for the bulk of the evacuation to take place. Burges was then once again almost totally destroyed.
It's a lovely looking town, but it's a little bit on the quiet side. It's been a good day today. Kind of salvaged really from yesterday's deluge where I couldn't really get out, but yeah, I feel like I've chalked one up today and done well. Well pleased. Right, let's go and find a bit of food and cold beer hopefully. Very nice. Très bien. Good morning. And it is a lovely morning. Birds are singing, the sun's out, and it's beautifully fresh. And there's no strong wind today either, which is really good. I'm going to see if I can get back to the ferry a little earlier today and catch an earlier sailing. Just going along and the wheel didn't feel right and I think I might have got a puncture up. Oh well, it's the first puncture I've ever had on the road with this one, which has done a few thousand miles. Okay.
Let's hope that does the trick.
Not too sure whether that puncture might have set me back a little bit, and it might be a bit tight getting the earlier ferry now. We'll see. See how we get on. We're at the port now, finally. Managed to get that earlier ferry. So we're getting back to Blighty just that bit quicker. Bit of luck really, because this boat was actually leaving an hour late. So I've turned up and just rode straight on. Yeah, good to have a bit of luck, isn't it? Especially after this morning's puncture. But that was no big deal. It went okay. The run through Dunkirk was a bit of a nightmare. It's not a very nice town to be riding through, and it was probably the worst sort of 10 miles of the 250 odd that I've done. But hey, I'm here now. Enjoy myself with breakfast. Not bad, eh, for 12 quid.
I'd seen so much over the past 10 days, and now that my cycling was done, I reflected on what had been quite a tour. Began to feel very much the weary traveller. Glad, of course, to be returning home, but also just a little bit sad that this special journey was now over. The cycling had been just brilliant. The flat open countryside and quiet roads certainly make for an easy, relaxed ride. It's a beautiful landscape, of that there is no doubt. And all too often it's easy to forget that all this was once a huge muddy battlefield where millions of men died. But there are of course many reminders of the Great War, with the countless cemeteries and memorials dotted around all over. And it was by coming to these former battlefields and following in the footsteps of where my own past family members once saw action, made this journey feel more of a pilgrimage to honour them, and all those brave men who gave everything for king and country. It was an all-round unforgettable and at times emotional experience. It was everything that I hoped it would be, and so much more. It's a gorgeous day. Well, that's pretty much the end of the journey and this video, I guess. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I've enjoyed riding it. And that it hasn't put you off camping or cycling too much. That perhaps it's inspired you to your own adventures in the future. I hope so. Anyway, if you stuck it this far, thanks for watching.